Chapter 14. Third-person POV. The grand chamber of Yggdrasil's central headquarters was bathed in soft light from crystal chandeliers hanging high above the oval table where the most influential leaders of the nation had gathered. Each chair around the table was filled by an executive of exceptional power and importance, every one of them a testament to Rimuru's influence and the bonds he had formed over the years. The mood in the room was tense yet reverent, as they awaited the arrival of the one they all served, Rimuru. The door opened, and in walked Rimuru, his presence commanding instant respect. As one, the assembled executives stood and bowed deeply, their movements synchronized in a display of absolute loyalty. Rimuru, always humble despite his immense power, gestured for them to sit. His voice was gentle yet firm. "Take your seats." Grimgr, the Prime Minister of Yggdrasil, took his seat closest to Rimuru. The once unnamed goblin had been transformed into a hobgoblin of towering stature and regal bearing, a reflection of the strength and wisdom bestowed upon him by his master. Grimgr's eyes, now sharp and intelligent, scanned the room, his posture embodying the pride he felt as both Rimuru's right hand and the Goblin King. Though a leader of his own people, he remained humble in the presence of the one who had given him everything. Seated next to him was Shikamaru, the Minister of Defense and currently acting Commander-in-Chief. Shikamaru, a Kijin, radiated strength. His large, muscular frame was covered by a suit of red Japanese armor, and his long, red hair flowed from his ponytail, almost grazing the floor. Two white horns protruded proudly from his head, symbols of his pride in his ogre heritage. His scarlet-red beard and mustache framed a face filled with experience and dignity. Though young in comparison to some of his peers, Shikamaru's calm but decisive leadership on the battlefield earned him the title of Ogre King. His striking resemblance to Benimaru, a figure yet to be born in this timeline, added an eerie sense of destiny to his presence. Across the table sat Hakuro, the chief instructor of Yggdrasil's military. Known for his legendary swordsmanship, even as an unnamed ogre, Hakuro's reputation preceded him. His eyes, sharp as the blade he wielded, darted between the other executives as he quietly assessed the room. Despite his youth, Hakuro had an air of wisdom that many of his older peers found unnerving. His movements were precise and controlled, the mark of a warrior who could defeat enemies without wasting a single motion. His position as chief instructor was not just a title, it was a mantle he wore with pride, knowing that every warrior under Yggdrasil's banner would someday carry a part of his legacy. Kagejin, the Minister of Intelligence, leaned slightly forward, his sharp eyes observing everything. Imagine in Rimuru's service, Kagejin's expertise in espionage and subterfuge made him one of the most dangerous figures in the room, despite his relatively unimposing frame. The leader of the Yamikage, Yggdrasil's shadowy intelligence organization, Kagejin had trained his Dragonute agents well. They moved unseen, gathering information from across the world, their ninja-like attire a homage to Kagejin's own aesthetic and skills. His ability to infiltrate and manipulate without being detected made him both respected and feared among his peers. The silence in which he conducted his work only heightened his mystique. Demiurge, the Earth Dragon and leader of the Department of Construction and Manufacturing, took his place. His prodigious height and broad shoulders made him an imposing figure. Over 2 meters tall, his human form exuded raw power. His tattoos, his facial marking adds some life to his complexion. The 2 lines that descend from Demiurge's eyes are the same color as his eyes, a rich green that truly stands out, gave him a fierce, almost otherworldly appearance. Yet, his aura was what truly distinguished him unrestrained, it was as if he could shatter mountains with his bare hands. As one of Rimuru's 4 guardian lords and a member of the top 3 most powerful subordinates, Demiurge was a force to be reckoned with, both in battle and in matters of statecraft. Beside Demiurge sat Albedo, the Minister of Internal Affairs and Legislation. Her demeanor was the epitome of grace and poise. Every word she spoke was deliberate, calculated to bring about the best outcome. Despite her calm and composed exterior, Albedo's heart burned with respect and admiration for Rimuru. She often acted as an older sister to the other executives, offering wisdom when needed and a firm hand when necessary. Her centuries of experience had taught her the value of companionship and trust, qualities that made her indispensable to Rimuru's council. Finally, there were the twin flames of Yggdrasil's defense, Frigidus and Ignis, the guardian overseers and 2 of Rimuru's most powerful subordinates. Frigidus, with his icy calm and precise speech, was the embodiment of restraint and control. Yet, despite his cold exterior, his loyalty to Rimuru was fierce. Any insult to his master would set ablaze a fury as intense as any flame, a side of him rarely seen but deeply feared by those who knew of it. By contrast, Ignis, his counterpart, was the very essence of passion and fire. His crimson eyes glowed with an inner heat, and his temperament, though controlled, was always on the verge of igniting. Both Ignis and Frigidus, as the most powerful of the four guardian lords, commanded immense respect within Yggdrasil. Their complementary natures made them a perfect balance of fire and ice, one ready to burn away any threat, the other prepared to freeze it in its tracks. As the meeting commenced, a while back, Rimuru's Pav. As I stood in the palace, my mind drifted. The meeting with Milam and Chloe had gone as expected, simple, light-hearted, and uneventful. But I have a different agenda in mind now. Reaching out with thought communication, I connected with Frigidus. Frigidus gathers every executive and the guardians of Yggdrasil in the meeting hall. I'll be there in 5 minutes. My voice rang through our link. Before he could respond, I cut the connection. No time for idle conversation. I needed to prepare. I glanced over at Milam, who was busy humming to herself, and Chloe, who wore that ever-serious expression. Always so focused, I couldn't help but chuckle inwardly at the contrast between the two of them. But now wasn't the time for those thoughts. The three of us made our way inside the palace, walking down the long, gleaming corridors. The mana crystals embedded in the walls shimmered softly, illuminating our path. I could feel the weight of the place pressing down on me, a symbol of everything I had built. Yggdrasil had grown so much larger than even I had imagined. And now, I was leaving it behind, even if just for a while. It felt strange. I led the way in silence. Milam occasionally glanced at Chloe, probably trying to gauge her mood, but Chloe kept her eyes forward, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. As for me, well, my mind was already in the meeting hall. When we finally arrived, I pushed open the grand doors with a flick of my wrist. They swung inward with a soft creak, revealing the familiar sight. Everyone was already gathered, every executive of Yggdrasil, seated around the massive square table, awaiting my arrival. Their eyes immediately turned toward me, and in perfect unison, they rose to their feet, bowing deeply. I scanned the room, locking eyes with each of them for a moment. Grimgr, my prime minister, stood with his usual steady, stoic presence. He had come so far from the goblin I once named. Next to him was Shikamaru, the Minister of Defense and acting commander-in-chief, his imposing figure and scarlet beard making him almost a mirror image of Benimaru from my past life, an amusing comparison considering Benimaru hadn't even been born yet. Hekuro, the chief instructor, stood at the ready, the legendary swordmaster as calm and composed as ever. Kagejin, my faithful shadow, the head of intelligence, watched me closely, ever vigilant, his ninja-like attire blending into the shadows of the room. And of course, Demiurge and Albedo were present, along with Frigidus and Ignis, my two most trusted guardian lords. "Take your seats," I said, my voice echoing through the chamber. They obeyed instantly, sitting around the table with practiced ease. I took the middle seat, as was custom, with Milam to my left and Chloe to my right. Once we were all settled, I gestured toward Chloe, who remained poised and calm despite the weight of everyone's gaze. "Before we begin, I'd like to introduce Chloe Obel, the hero, and an old friend of mine," I said, my voice light but formal. It was time for her to become part of this world too. Chloe stood up, her eyes flickering to the gathered executives before giving them a respectful nod. "It's an honor to be here. As Rimuru said, I am Chloe Obel, the hero. I look forward to working alongside you all." Her introduction was brief but carried the weight it needed. I glanced around the room to gauge the reaction. Everyone was quiet, though I could sense a mixture of surprise and curiosity from some of the executives. After all, the hero was a legend in her own right. And now she was here, standing before them, as my companion. Milam, as expected, barely contained her boredom, leaning back in her chair, her fingers tapping lightly against the armrest. I could feel her impatience from a mile away. It made me chuckle inwardly. She wasn't made for these formal settings. I shifted in my seat, moving to the heart of the matter. "I've called you all here to inform you that I will be leaving Yggdrasil for an extended period," I began, making sure my voice carried across the room. "Chloe and I are going on an adventure. It may take years before we return." As expected, the room reacted immediately. Murmurs spread across the table, concerned glances exchanged between the executives. Grimgr was the first to speak, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. "My lord, while I understand your desire for exploration, surely taking some of your subordinates with you would be the safer choice. What if something happens?" I smiled at him. It was a valid concern, but one I had already anticipated. "I appreciate the concern, Grimger, but this is something I must do without a retinue. Chloe will be with me, and together, we're more than capable of handling anything that comes our way. Shikamaru nodded in agreement with Grimger, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. It's not just about your safety, Lord Rimuru. The world beyond Yggdrasil is vast, and there are unknown forces. You should consider taking at least one of us. Again, I waved off their worries. Trust me, I understand the risks, but the purpose of this journey isn't to travel as a ruler or a protector. I need to go as a simple traveler. No titles, no grand escort, just me and Chloe, exploring the world. Frigidus, always calm but fiercely loyal, leaned forward, his voice unusually hesitant. Lord Rimuru, are you certain? The outside world still doubts the existence of a fifth true dragon. And even if none can oppose you directly, there may be unforeseen challenges. I turned my gaze to him. And nodded. There's no need to be concerned about that. And besides, if anything does come up. I grinned, feeling the weight of my power surge through me. There's no one that can stand against a true dragon, especially me. And I can contact you whenever I require. The room fell silent again. Slowly, I saw the realization settle in. They knew me, knew my strength. They could protest all they wanted, but in the end, they had faith in me. They had too. Albedo, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke, her voice gentle yet firm. We trust you, Lord Rimuru. We will manage Yggdrasil in your absence. Rest assured, everything will be handled properly until your return. I smiled at her. Thank you, Albedo. I'm leaving everything in your capable hands. Just as I thought things were calming down, Milam suddenly perked up, her voice cutting through the silence. Wait, what about me? I wanna come too. Milam declared, her eyes wide with excitement. She leaned forward in her chair, nearly tipping it over in her eagerness. I glanced at her, trying to suppress a laugh. It was typical of Milam to want to join in on anything that even remotely hinted at an adventure. But this was different. I couldn't have her tagging along for this one, not with the kind of journey Chloe and I were about to embark on. Sorry, Milam, I said, shaking my head gently. This trip isn't about fighting or causing a ruckus. It's a peaceful journey, just me and Chloe. Milam's face fell, her lips forming a pout that could melt steel. She crossed her arms, leaning back in her chair with an exaggerated huff. That's not fair, Rimuru. You're always leaving me out of the fun. I gave her a knowing smile, trying to soften the blow. It's not about fun this time. I promise, when we come back, we'll do something exciting together. Maybe a big sparring match or an expedition just you and me. How does that sound? She perked up slightly at the mention of a future challenge, though she still wore a defiant expression. Fine, but you better not forget. Chloe, who had been quietly observing the exchange, gave me a sidelong glance, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. I could tell she was amused by Milam's energy, though she wisely stayed out of the conversation. With Milam somewhat appeased, I turned my attention back to the rest of the room. As I said, I'll be leaving soon. In my absence, Albedo will oversee internal affairs, while Grimger and Shikamaru will manage defense and state matters. Demiurge and the others will ensure everything runs smoothly. I could sense the weight of my words hanging in the air, the reality of my departure sinking in for everyone. But these people, my trusted subordinates, had faced far worse challenges before. They would handle things, as they always did. Frigidus, Ignis, I added, turning to the twin flames of Yggdrasil's defense, you'll be in charge of external threats. If anything serious arises, don't hesitate to act. I trust you both to keep Yggdrasil safe. They nodded in unison, their expressions as determined as ever. Frigidus remained composed, while Ignis looked eager, almost as if he was hoping something would happen while I was away. Understood, Lord Rimuru, Frigidus said calmly, his icy demeanor as steady as always. Ignis simply grinned, his fiery eyes gleaming with anticipation. I leaned back in my chair, satisfied with the arrangements. Everything was in place. Now, it was time for Chloe and me to set off on our adventure. As for the rest of you, I said, addressing the entire room, carry on as usual. I expect nothing less than perfection while I'm gone. The tension in the room dissipated slightly as the weight of the meeting lifted. My executives had their roles, their orders, and their trust in me. They would hold Yggdrasil together while I was away, and when I returned, we would be stronger than ever. That's all, I concluded. You're dismissed. The executives rose once more, bowing deeply before filing out of the room, each of them already focused on their new responsibilities. As the last of them left, I turned to Chloe, who remained seated beside me, her gaze steady. Grimgur's Pav. As I watched Rimuru enter the room, my heart swelled with pride. From the moment he named me and elevated our tribe, I knew my purpose was to serve him faithfully. Looking around the room at the other executives, I realized how far we had come under his guidance. I was once a mere goblin, nothing more than a nameless creature wandering the wilderness. Now, I stood as Prime Minister of Yggdrasil, a nation rivaling the gods themselves. My chest tightened with the weight of the responsibility, but it wasn't fear. No, it was determination, a drive to ensure that everything I did would be worthy of the trust Rimuru had placed in me. When Rimuru mentioned his upcoming journey, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. The world outside Yggdrasil was dangerous, unpredictable. Even with Chloe by his side, I couldn't shake the feeling that something could go wrong. I opened my mouth to speak, voicing the concern that echoed through the chamber. My lord, while I understand your desire for exploration, surely taking some of your subordinates with you would be the safer choice. What if something happens? I tried to sound calm, but beneath my words lay a deep-seated fear. Yggdrasil needed Rimuru. Without him, our nation's foundation would tremble. But as always, Rimuru brushed aside our concerns, his unwavering confidence both reassuring and troubling. I forced myself to trust his judgment, as I always had. After all, he had never led us astray. Shikamaru's Pav. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers tapping idly against the table as I processed Rimuru's words. He was leaving, traveling the world, without us, without any protection beyond Chloe. The notion didn't sit right with me. As the Minister of Defense, it was my duty to ensure his safety, and while I trusted his strength, I knew better than most how chaotic the world outside could be. Even before he finished explaining, I found myself strategizing. The defenses we'd need to bolster, the contingencies we'd have to prepare in his absence. Rimuru had transformed us all, made us stronger, smarter, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something unforeseen could happen. It's not just about your safety, Lord Rimuru, I said, my voice low but firm. The world beyond Yggdrasil is vast, and there are unknown forces. You should consider taking at least one of us. I could see in his eyes that he wasn't going to change his mind, and while I respected his independence, the weight of my role pressed down on me. No matter how capable he was, I was responsible for ensuring the safety of our people, and that included him. Hakuro's Pav. My eyes darted around the room, silently assessing the mood of my peers as Rimuru spoke. I admired their loyalty, their dedication to protecting our leader, but I knew better than anyone the strength that Rimuru possessed. Strength I had witnessed firsthand in our training sessions, in battles we had fought side by side. The others might worry, but I remained calm, focused. If Rimuru believed this journey was necessary, I trusted his decision. Still, there was a nagging thought in the back of my mind. The world was unpredictable. No amount of skill, no matter how refined, could account for the unforeseen. But Rimuru was not like others. He was a force of nature untouchable. I watched as the others voiced their concerns, my fingers resting lightly on the hilt of my sword, a habit I hadn't quite outgrown. While they spoke, I said nothing, only offering a silent nod of agreement when Rimuru dismissed their worries. I would prepare our soldiers in his absence. If anything should happen, we would be ready. It was all I could do as chief instructor. Kagejan's Pav. The shadows danced across the walls, as I sat in silence, observing everything, as always. My role wasn't to speak out of turn or voice concerns unnecessarily, it was to gather information, to assess, to act when needed. Rimuru's announcement of his departure wasn't a surprise to me, I had anticipated it. In fact, I had already begun preparing, ensuring that Yggdrasil's intelligence network would remain fully operational in his absence. Still, I couldn't deny the unease growing within me. Rimuru was our leader, the anchor of this nation, and without him, our enemies both seen and unseen might find the courage to test our defenses. My agents had already reported whispers of unrest beyond our borders. Though none could challenge Yggdrasil directly, opportunities arose in the most unexpected places. I said nothing during the meeting, content to watch and listen, trusting in Rimuru's judgment. But in the back of my mind, I began forming plans, contingencies for any number of scenarios. After all, that was my job, anticipate the worst, and ensure we were never caught unprepared. Demiurge's Pav. I crossed my arms, leaning back slightly as I absorbed Rimuru's words. So, he was leaving. An extended journey, with only Chloe by his side. I could sense the unease in the room, the concern in my peers, but for me, there was only confidence. Rimuru was more powerful than any force in this world, and I had full faith that he could handle whatever challenges came his way. If anything, I found the idea of him exploring the world rather exciting. What new marvels would he return with? Still, I understood the concerns of the others. Yggdrasil was our home, our fortress, and Rimuru was the cornerstone of everything we had built. Without him here, even temporarily, the thought of our defenses weakening was a valid fear. But I also knew that we were strong in our own right. The structures I had built, the fortifications and supply chains I managed, would hold. I would make sure of it. As one of Rimuru's 4 guardian lords, I saw it as my duty to ensure that Yggdrasil continued to thrive, with or without his presence. If anyone tried to disrupt that, they would find out just how far my influence reached. Albedo's Pav. As I listened to Rimuru, a wave of understanding washed over me. He had always been independent, always seeking growth beyond the boundaries others placed on him. But this time, something about his decision to leave struck me as different. Perhaps it was because of Chloe, or maybe it was something deeper, a need to see the world through different eyes. Whatever the case, my role was clear. The others may have worried about his absence, but I didn't. I had been in positions of power long enough to know how to maintain order, how to lead even when the foundation seemed shaky. Yggdrasil was stable, and I would make sure it stayed that way. Rimuru's absence would be felt, but not enough to weaken our nation. I would see to that personally. My lord, I spoke after the others had voiced their concerns, my voice calm but resolute. We trust you. We will manage Yggdrasil in your absence. Rest assured, everything will be handled properly until your return. My words were both a promise and a command. I knew the others trusted me to lead, and I wouldn't fail them or Rimuru. Frigidus Pav. I leaned forward slightly, my cold gaze fixed on Rimuru as he announced his departure. My mind raced with scenarios, possibilities that could arise during his absence. Threats that could emerge from the shadows. Rimuru's power was undeniable, but no one, not even a true dragon, was invincible. Lord Rimuru, I began, my voice calm yet laced with a hint of worry, are you certain? The outside world still doubts the existence of a 5th true dragon. And even if none can oppose you directly, there may be unforeseen challenges. It wasn't Rimuru's strength I doubted, it was the unpredictability of the world outside Yggdrasil. In his absence, it would fall to us to protect everything he had built. My duty was clear, ensure that Yggdrasil remained untouchable, even without its leader. Rimuru reassured me, his usual confidence shining through. I trusted him, I had to, but deep down, I knew I'd be keeping a close watch, ready to act should anything threaten what we had built together. Ignis Pav. Fire burned within me, as it always did, but this time, it wasn't fueled by excitement or combat, it was concern. Rimuru was leaving, setting off on an adventure without us, and I couldn't help but feel restless. He didn't need us, he said. He and Chloe could handle whatever came their way. But part of me wanted to argue, to insist that I come along anyway. Yet, I knew better. Rimuru's mind was made up, and nothing I said would change that. Still, my role as one of his guardian lords was to protect, to ensure his safety no matter what. Being left behind felt wrong. But I trusted him. If he believed this was the right course of action, then I had no choice but to accept it. Still, the fire in me flickered with a mix of pride and frustration. Ignis's Pav. My fiery eyes flickered between Rimuru and the others as they debated his decision. The room was filled with concern, especially from Grimgir and Shikamaru, but none of them knew the full truth. None of them truly understood why Rimuru was so confident in his safety. They didn't know about Chloe. Only Frigidus and I did. We were the only ones entrusted with that knowledge, Rimuru's most trusted friend, Chloe, the hero. To the others, Chloe was an enigma. She was just someone who appeared beside Rimuru from time to time, someone they barely knew anything about. But we knew better. We knew her strength, her connection to Rimuru, and why he trusted her more than anyone else. In a way, it made sense why he didn't tell the others. They wouldn't understand her power, the bond she and Rimuru shared. To them, she was just a mysterious presence. To us, she was someone who had stood by our master when the world crumbled around him. Even so, the others had every right to worry. Leaving Yggdrasil without its core leader was dangerous, even with someone like Chloe by his side. I crossed my arms, holding back a sigh as I felt the growing tension in the room. As Grimgir finished voicing his concerns, I spoke up, my voice calm but carrying the heat of my internal flame. Lord Rimuru is more than capable of handling anything that comes his way. And with Chloe accompanying him, there's no need to worry. My words were meant to reassure, but I could see the doubt lingering in their eyes. Of course, they didn't know Chloe's true strength. I glanced over at Frigidus, who met my gaze with a knowing look. He, too, kept silent about the true depth of their bond. It wasn't our place to reveal it. Rimuru had entrusted us with that secret, and we would guard it with our lives. Frigidus's paw. I listened quietly, my arms crossed and my gaze steady as the others spoke their concerns. They were right to be cautious. Rimuru's decision to leave, with only Chloe as his companion, was bold, if not reckless in their eyes. But I knew the truth. Ignis and I were the only ones who understood the gravity of Rimuru's trust in Chloe. She wasn't just some mysterious traveler to us, she was his most trusted ally, his closest friend. To the rest of the room, she was an unknown. A person who had appeared in Rimuru's life with little explanation, someone who seemed to come and go. But to us, Chloe was a force to be reckoned with. Her power wasn't something easily understood, and Rimuru had trusted her with tasks that even we couldn't handle. She was capable of handling the unexpected, the unpredictable, and that's why Rimuru had chosen her. But I couldn't say any of that. No one in this room needed to know who Chloe truly was. That wasn't our place to reveal. Rimuru had kept it from them for a reason, and I would respect that decision. Still, I couldn't ignore the unease in the room. The others didn't know Chloe's strength, and didn't understand why Rimuru was so confident. To them, it must have felt like he was leaving them vulnerable. I met Ignis's gaze from across the room, a silent understanding passing between us. We had our own duties in Rimuru's absence, and revealing too much about Chloe wouldn't help anyone. Instead, I finally spoke, my voice cold but clear, like the frost that always accompanied me. You all worry too much. Lord Rimuru wouldn't leave without being sure of his safety. I didn't need to say more. They wouldn't understand Chloe's role, and I didn't expect them to. But they trusted me, and for now, that was enough. I leaned back in my seat, mentally preparing myself for the challenges ahead. We had our orders, and as long as Chloe was with Rimuru, there was no need to fear for his safety. I only hoped that when the time came, the others would realize just how vital Chloe was to our master. Rimuru's paw. Sitting back in my office, I stared at the map sprawled on my desk, the parchment covered in faded routes and detailed notations of lands I had long since mastered. The thought of registering as an adventurer was a bit laughable, to be honest. After all, I was Rimuru, ruler of a nation, and one of the most powerful beings in existence. Yet, having that little piece of paper, the adventurer's license, would smooth things over, ensure we wouldn't have to deal with pesky bureaucrats or suspicious guards. It wasn't about necessity, it was about avoiding the nuisance of constantly having to explain myself. Chloe sat across from me, her gaze calm yet curious as she sipped her tea. Her emerald eyes glimmered in the soft light of the room, a silent question on her lips. You're really going through with this? Registering as an adventurer? I let out a soft chuckle. Yeah, why not? It'll be a nice change of pace. Plus, I think it'll be fun to lay low for a while, travel without all the formalities. It's just a precaution, you know. Her eyebrow quirked in amusement. You, needing a license? That's a bit ridiculous, Rimuru. But I get it. Better to avoid unwanted attention. Keeping things simple. Chloe always understood. Her words weren't questioning my decision but acknowledging it in her way. I nodded, appreciating her perspective. Exactly. This way, we can travel freely, no one asking too many questions. Just two adventurers, blending in with the crowd. Her lips curved into a faint smile. I suppose it's a bit exciting. After all, it's been a while since we just wandered without a specific purpose. It'll be good for us. Before I could respond, Milam rose from her seat with her characteristic enthusiasm, her eyes brimming with energy as she stretched her arms high. All right, Rimuru, I'm heading back to Drongos. I've got some stuff to take care of. I couldn't help but smile at her usual exuberance. Just don't cause too much trouble while I'm gone, all right? Milam grinned widely, her eyes sparkling with determination. I never cause trouble, she declared proudly, but I'll make sure to plan something fun. For when you come visit. And with that, she bolted out of the room, leaving a rush of wind and her vibrant energy in her wake. Chloe laughed softly beside me, her amusement evident. She's always full of energy. It's never boring when she's around. I leaned back, watching the door swing shut behind Milam. Yeah, she's one of a kind. But that's why we care about her. Standing, I stretched slightly, feeling the subtle pull of anticipation at the thought of what lay ahead. Shall we get going, then? Chloe set her teacup down, her movements graceful as always. She stood with a gentle smile, a look of quiet resolve in her eyes. Ready when you are. Bloomond Kingdom. The journey to Bloomond was peaceful, the quiet hum of nature our only companion as we made our way through the sprawling forests and open plains. The wind danced through the trees, rustling the leaves, and the scent of fresh earth filled the air. Chloe and I traveled in comfortable silence, both of us content to enjoy the serene beauty around us. There was no need for conversation, our thoughts aligned as we moved forward, anticipating what lay ahead. Bloomond's towering walls came into view as we approached, standing tall against the horizon. The city's banners fluttered gently in the breeze, the sounds of life bustling within its gates. The city itself seemed lively, the sun casting a golden hue over its streets as we passed through the gates, greeted by the sights and sounds of the busy marketplace. Street vendors called out, the aroma of food mingling with the scent of fresh produce, while adventurers and townsfolk alike mingled in the lively square. Chloe stayed close beside me, her presence steady and commanding. As always, she was quiet but not unnoticed. A few passing glances from the crowd were inevitable, but nothing that lingered too long, just the curiosity of strangers. We moved through the city swiftly, heading straight for the Adventurers Guild. The guild building itself stood proud, a large wooden structure with heavy doors and a sign above bearing the mark of the guild. It wasn't hard to find after all, adventurers were the heart of any city's spirit. As we stepped inside, the air was thick with the sounds of adventurers sharing tales of their exploits, strategizing their next missions, and recounting their victories. The large room buzzed with life, the scent of polished wood and worn leather filling the space. We made our way to the reception desk, where a young clerk greeted us with a polite smile. "Welcome to the Adventurers Guild. How can I help you today?" she asked, her eyes bright with the eagerness of someone who had seen countless adventurers pass through these doors but was always intrigued by the new faces. "We'd like to register as adventurers," I said, keeping my tone light, even though this was all just a formality. "Rimuru and Chloe," I added as she reached for the necessary paperwork. Her hands moved swiftly, preparing the forms for us to fill out. Despite keeping our magical auras tightly controlled, there was no hiding the vast difference in presence between us and the other adventurers. Even the clerk's smile faltered slightly, her eyes widening for just a moment before she regained her professional demeanor. "I see. It won't take long," she said, her fingers flying across the papers, already aware that we wouldn't need any standard assessment tests. With power like ours, the guild knew better than to bother. We completed the registration process without issue. The guild quickly ranked us as A-rank adventurers, skipping over the usual demonstrations of strength and combat ability. They knew, as did we, that we were far beyond the need for such formalities. Stepping back outside, I glanced at the licenses now in our possession. "Well, that was easy," Chloe grinned, mischief dancing in her eyes. "Officially adventurers now, huh? What's next on the agenda?" I paused, considering our next move. "I've heard rumors of strange creatures appearing in the nearby forests. Might be worth checking out. Could be a good start to our little adventure." Chloe's expression shifted to one of intrigue. "Lead the way then. I'm ready." With that, we set off once more, leaving the city behind as the forest loomed ahead. The air grew cooler as the canopy thickened, and the sounds of civilization faded into the background. A new chapter had begun, and though we carried immense power, this journey was about discovery, not dominance. The path ahead was unwritten, and I was ready to explore every part of it, with Chloe at my side. A step into the unknown. The sky stretched endlessly above, a pale blue canvas dotted with fluffy white clouds. The wind blew softly, carrying the faint scent of blooming wildflowers and the distant hum of a lively city just over the horizon. Rimuru stood at the top of a small hill, surveying the landscape with a curious gleam in his eyes. There was something exhilarating about this, the prospect of adventure, of leaving behind the familiar world he had shaped and stepping into the unknown. Chloe was by his side, as always, her emerald eyes scanning the same horizon. However, unlike Rimuru, her thoughts seemed more focused on the journey ahead than on the scenery itself. There was a tension in her stance, subtle but present, betraying the calm and collected exterior she usually wore. Chloe rarely showed all her cards, but over the years, Rimuru had become adept at reading her. Today, she seemed different, perhaps a little more on edge than usual. "Ready?" Rimuru asked, flashing her a bright smile, hoping to lighten her mood. Chloe turned to him, the corner of her lips twitching upwards in a half-smile. Always. There was determination in her voice, but Rimuru could detect the hint of something else, a slight wavering, almost imperceptible, but it was there. He chuckled softly. You sound like you're heading into battle. It's just an adventure. We can relax and enjoy it. Relaxing isn't exactly my specialty, Chloe admitted with a light laugh, though there was an underlying tension in her words. It wasn't like her to be this nervous, and Rimuru couldn't help but wonder if it had anything to do with them being alone together. She was rarely so unsettled, but today, she seemed more guarded than usual. Besides, you know me. I prefer to stay prepared. Of course, Rimuru replied, his voice gentle but teasing. But let's try to have a little fun along the way, huh? No need to treat this like a mission. Chloe shot him a sideways glance, something unspoken passing between them. Her lips twitched again, this time almost as if she was trying to hide a smile. We'll see. As they began their descent down the hill toward the kingdom of Anglacia, their steps fell into a familiar rhythm, their silent understanding setting the tone for the journey ahead. Despite the unease he sensed from Chloe, Rimuru was confident that they could handle whatever awaited them. After all, they had faced far greater challenges together, and he wasn't one to worry about such things. As long as Chloe was by his side, things would work out just fine. The road to Anglacia. The sun was beginning its slow descent when the towering walls of Anglacia came into view, standing tall and majestic against the fading sky. Even at this hour, the city seemed to pulse with life, merchants and travelers streaming in and out of the gates, their voices rising in a harmonious blend of chatter and business. Rimuru felt a spark of excitement at the sight. Anglacia had changed since the last time he'd been here, and he was eager to explore the city's new developments. As much as he was powerful and experienced, there was still something refreshing about walking among ordinary people, experiencing life through a different lens. You seem enthusiastic, Chloe observed quietly, her voice breaking through his thoughts. Rimuru grinned at her, catching the flicker of uncertainty in her gaze. Of course, it's not every day we get to explore a new city. And who knows what kind of fun we'll find here. Chloe's smile was faint, but it was there. I suppose it's been a while since we've had any downtime like this. Rimuru laughed softly, the sound full of ease and playfulness. That's exactly why we should make the most of it. No fighting, no heavy responsibilities. Just freedom. He stretched his arms wide, breathing in the crisp air, relishing the sense of freedom he spoke of. Chloe watched him, but there was a hesitation in her eyes. You make it sound so simple. Because it is, Rimuru said, his unwavering confidence shining through. We're strong enough to handle anything, so why not enjoy life for a bit? For a moment, Chloe's gaze softened, and Rimuru thought he saw something flicker in her eyes, an emotion he couldn't quite place. But it disappeared as quickly as it came, replaced by her usual composure. Still, the small glimpse left him feeling something. Maybe it was the way she looked at him sometimes, with a mix of admiration and something deeper, something he wasn't quite ready to acknowledge. As they neared the gates, Chloe spoke again, her tone softer this time. A small adventure wouldn't hurt. Rimuru glanced at her, catching the subtle nervousness in her voice. His heart gave a strange little flutter at the thought that perhaps she wasn't just nervous about the journey. They had been alone many times before, but this time, something felt different. Exploring Anglacia. The streets of Anglacia were alive with energy. Vendors called out from their stalls, selling everything from exotic fruits to finely crafted jewelry. Adventurers roamed the streets, discussing quests and boasting of their latest victories. Rimuru and Chloe moved through the crowd, their presence quietly commanding. Rimuru, ever the extrovert, couldn't resist engaging with the people they passed, greeting them with his usual charm and ease. It didn't take long for the locals to warm up to him, their initial wariness melting away in the face of his charisma. You really do know how to make friends wherever you go, Chloe noted, her voice tinged with both amusement and admiration. Rimuru grinned, shooting her a playful glance. What can I say? People like me. Chloe shook her head, though her smile betrayed her amusement. I wonder how you'd manage without that charm of yours. I'd still be amazing, Rimuru said, his confidence unwavering. But it helps to have a little extra charisma, don't you think? Chloe hummed softly, though Rimuru noticed the way her gaze flitted away from him. There was something in her posture, a tightness in her shoulders, a slight unease that seemed out of place for someone so typically composed. It was subtle, but Rimuru knew Chloe well enough to recognize when something was bothering her. And the fact that they were alone together, without the usual distractions of battle or responsibilities, seemed to be weighing on her more than she let on. As they explored the marketplace, Rimuru found his thoughts drifting back to Chloe more often than he intended. He couldn't deny the comfort her presence brought him, the way her calm balanced out his more carefree nature. And yet, there were moments like now when he caught her looking at him with those deep, unreadable eyes, and something inside him stirred. Chloe had feelings for him, he knew that much. Her loyalty, the way she stayed by his side through everything, spoke volumes. But Rimuru wasn't ready, couldn't allow himself to fully embrace it. There was too much history between them, too much of the past that still lingered in his mind. As the evening wore on and the city's lights began to glow softly in the encroaching darkness, Rimuru found himself watching Chloe as she examined a small pendant at one of the stalls. The glow of the lantern softened her features, making her look almost peaceful. It was a rare sight, seeing Chloe so at ease, and Rimuru felt his heart tighten in a way he wasn't used to. "Hey," he called out softly, stepping closer. "Find anything you like." Chloe turned, holding up the small pendant, a simple, elegant silver chain with a sapphire stone in the center. "It reminded me of you," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, Rimuru didn't know what to say. There was something so vulnerable in her words, so unlike her usual confident self, that it left him momentarily speechless. He felt his chest tighten, the weight of her quiet affection suddenly much heavier than he expected. "That's sweet, Chloe," Rimuru said softly, his usual playfulness slipping just a little. "Thanks." Their eyes met, and for a moment, everything else fell away. The bustling market, the noise, the people, all of it faded into the background, leaving only the two of them standing there in the quiet glow of the lanterns. But before Rimuru could say anything more, a voice cut through the air, breaking the moment. "Rimuru, there you are." Rimuru turned, recognizing the voice immediately. It was an adventurer they had met earlier, eager to introduce them to the local guild master. Rimuru sighed, offering Chloe an apologetic smile. "Looks like we're popular already." Chloe's lips curved into a knowing smile, though there was a subtle warmth in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I wouldn't expect anything less." And with that, they followed the adventurer into the bustling night, the unspoken tension between them lingering like a soft, persistent hum in the air. The Guild of Anglacia. The adventurer leading Rimuru and Chloe through the winding streets of Anglacia was clearly excited, eager to introduce them to the local guild master. The bustling city had quieted somewhat as night fell, but the guild hall remained alive with energy, an eclectic mix of adventurers, merchants, and travelers, all sharing stories and boasting of their exploits. As they entered, Rimuru felt a few gazes linger on him. His presence, as always, drew attention, though he often brushed it off with a carefree smile. Beside him, Chloe walked in measured steps, her eyes sharp, quietly observing those whose admiration lingered just a bit too long on Rimuru. She tried to stay composed, but being alone with him in such an environment made her a little more nervous than she would care to admit. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides, a subtle sign of her unease. The guild hall was warm and loud, lanterns hanging from the high ceiling, and the sound of laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. Rimuru's eyes sparkled as he took in the lively atmosphere, his extroverted side coming to life. "This place feels like it's going to be fun," Rimuru said, grinning as he glanced at Chloe, the playful glint in his eyes not going unnoticed. Chloe, however, seemed less amused. She watched a group of women near the bar with a quiet intensity. They had noticed Rimuru the moment he walked in, and now, one of them was whispering excitedly to her companions, eyes gleaming with interest. Chloe shifted, trying to suppress the sudden discomfort tightening in her chest. Rimuru, ever oblivious to the more subtle social cues, strolled toward the counter with his usual charm. Chloe followed closely, her protective instincts bubbling up as the group of women began to move toward them. "Hey there," one of the women called out, her voice dripping with sweetness as she leaned a little too close to Rimuru. "You new in town?" Rimuru blinked, offering a polite smile. "Yeah, just passing through." The woman's gaze boldly wandered over him, making Chloe's irritation stir. Rimuru might not have noticed, but Chloe could see what this woman was up to. The light brush of her hand against Rimuru's arm, the coy smile, it was enough to make Chloe's stomach churn. Chloe's hand twitched, an instinctive reaction she quickly subdued. She took a breath, forcing herself to maintain her calm. Rimuru was friendly, yes, but he was hardly the type to fall for such blatant advances. Still, the sight of this woman being so casually affectionate toward him made Chloe's chest tighten. "And who's your friend?" another woman asked, her gaze briefly flicking to Chloe before settling back on Rimuru with barely contained interest. Rimuru, entirely unaware of Chloe's growing unease, chuckled lightly. This is Chloe, we're traveling together. The woman's eyes moved over Chloe, a quick, assessing look that made her skin prickle. Normally, she wouldn't care about such things, but the possessive gleam in the woman's gaze made her more self-conscious than usual. You're lucky to have him with you, the first woman said, voice dripping with insinuation, making Chloe's jaw tighten. Rimuru, still oblivious, laughed softly. I'm the lucky one. Chloe's been a great companion. A brief warmth bloomed in Chloe's chest at his words, but it was quickly snuffed out as the woman ignored Rimuru's praise of her. Instead, the woman's smile only grew wider as she leaned in closer. You know, Rimuru, she purred, if you're looking for some local company, we'd be happy to show you around. That was enough. Chloe stepped forward, her eyes sharp, voice low but cutting. I think you're mistaken. Rimuru doesn't need your company. The room around them seemed to pause. Chloe wasn't loud, but the sudden change in her tone, the quiet intensity in her voice, was impossible to ignore. The woman flinched slightly, her smile faltering as Chloe's icy gaze locked onto her. Rimuru, finally sensing the tension, looked between Chloe and the women, his confusion apparent. Chloe, I think we should meet with the guild master now, Chloe said, her voice tight, not bothering to acknowledge the women as she turned and walked toward the back of the hall where they had been told the guild master's office was located. Rimuru followed quickly, his usually light-hearted demeanor briefly shaken. As they walked, he cast an awkward smile over his shoulder at the women, who were already retreating, clearly unsettled by Chloe's sudden shift. Once they were out of earshot, Rimuru chuckled, though his laugh was more nervous than usual. You, seemed pretty intense back there, Chloe. Chloe kept her eyes ahead, arms crossed tightly over her chest. They were being disrespectful. Rimuru blinked, surprised by her curt response. I think they were just being friendly. No, Chloe interrupted, her voice firm, a quiet tremor of something deeper behind it. They weren't. Rimuru stared at her for a long moment, taken aback by the rare edge in her voice. Chloe was always so composed, rarely showing much beyond her usual serene confidence. But now, he could sense something else, a tension she was trying hard to conceal. Chloe's posture remained rigid, and Rimuru wondered if something more was weighing on her mind. He wanted to ask, to probe gently into what had caused this reaction, but before he could, they reached the guild master's door. Chloe knocked, the sound echoing down the hall. The door opened to reveal a burly man with a thick beard and a welcoming grin. Ah, you must be the new adventurers. He boomed, gesturing for them to come in. Come in, come in. Rimuru quickly slipped back into his usual friendly self, returning the guild master's smile. Yeah, that's us. Thanks for meeting with us. As they entered the office, Rimuru's thoughts lingered on Chloe. She had returned to her usual calm, but something still felt off. He could sense it in the way she stood, her shoulders slightly tense, her focus overly sharp on the guild master's words. Rimuru knew there would be time to talk later. But for now, he pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task at hand. A night of confessions. After the meeting with the guild master, Rimuru and Chloe were led to a private room at the inn where they would be staying for the night. The room was cozy, with a fireplace casting a soft glow over the wooden furniture. Chloe had been quiet since their encounter at the guild, and while Rimuru was used to her calm demeanor, the silence between them tonight felt heavier than usual. Rimuru stretched his arms and let out a deep sigh, the weight of the day settling in. Well, that was a lot, he said, plopping down on the bed with a grin. But at least we've got a room with a decent bed this time. No more sleeping on rocks. Chloe, standing by the window, gave a small nod but didn't respond. Her mind seemed far away, and the tension from earlier still lingered between them. Rimuru noticed, his smile fading slightly as he propped himself up on one elbow. Chloe, you've been quiet since the guild. Did I do something wrong? Chloe turned to face him, her expression unreadable at first. She crossed her arms over her chest, biting her lip as if debating whether to say something. Finally, she sighed, her voice soft but firm. It's not that you did anything wrong. It's just, those women back at the guild. Rimuru raised an eyebrow, clearly confused. What about them? Chloe's eyes narrowed slightly, though her frustration wasn't directed at Rimuru but at the situation. They were all over you, Rimuru. Acting like they could just step in and take your attention like it was nothing. Rimuru blinked, sitting up fully now. I mean, they were just being friendly. It's not like they weren't just being friendly, Chloe interrupted, her voice sharper than usual. She took a step closer to him, her emotions finally bubbling to the surface. They were flirting with you, Rimuru, and you didn't even realize it. Do you have any idea how frustrating that is? Rimuru opened his mouth to respond but found himself at a loss for words. He hadn't thought much of the encounter at the time, but now, seeing Chloe's reaction, he realized that there was more to it than he had understood. Chloe, seeing his confusion, let out a sigh and ran a hand through her hair. It's not just about them, Rimuru. It's everything. I've traveled with you for so long, seen you grow stronger, more confident. I've watched you protect people, care for them, but sometimes I feel like... She trailed off, her voice faltering for a moment. Like I'm just another person you're looking after. Like I'm just your responsibility. Her words hit Rimuru harder than he expected. He had always cared deeply for Chloe, but hearing her say that made him realize that perhaps he hadn't been as attuned to her feelings as he should have been. Chloe, he started, but she held up a hand, stopping him. I know I was your student once, in another timeline, in past, Chloe continued, her voice softer now, almost vulnerable. And I know that's why it's hard for you to see me any differently. But I'm not that girl anymore, Rimuru. I've changed, just like you have. And, I've been trying to show you how I feel, but you keep treating me like I'm still that same person from the past. Rimuru's breath caught in his throat. Chloe's words were like a cold splash of water, bringing him face to face with the reality he had been avoiding. He had always felt a sense of responsibility toward Chloe, seeing her as someone he needed to protect, but now he realized that she was asking for something more, something he hadn't been ready to acknowledge. Chloe stepped closer to him, her eyes locking onto his. I'm not asking for an answer right now, Rimuru. But I need you to understand that my feelings for you are real. I care about you, and it hurts when you don't seem to notice. Rimuru swallowed, his mind racing. He wasn't sure how to respond. On the one hand, he had always been fond of Chloe, even admired her strength and determination. But on the other hand, there was the complicated history they shared, the fact that she had once been his student, and the weight of the past still hung over him. But now, seeing the raw emotion in Chloe's eyes, he couldn't deny that something had shifted between them. He had always been protective of her, but was that all there was to his feelings? Chloe took a step back, her expression softening. I don't want to make things awkward between us. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was normal. Rimuru stood up, walking over to her slowly. Chloe, I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much this was weighing on you. I care about you a lot, actually, and maybe I've been too caught up in the past to really see you for who you are now. He reached out, gently placing a hand on her shoulder, his voice lowering. I won't pretend I've figured everything out. But I don't want you to feel like you're just someone I'm responsible for. You're important to me. Chloe's gaze softened at his words, and for a moment, the tension between them seemed to dissolve. She placed her hand over his, her touch gentle but firm. That's all I needed to hear. Rimuru smiled softly, relieved to see her mood easing. He pulled her into a gentle hug, feeling her relax in his arms. Let's take things slow, okay? I don't want to mess this up. Chloe rested her head against his chest, her voice barely a whisper. Okay. For a long moment, they stood there in silence, the weight of unspoken feelings finally lifting. Rimuru didn't have all the answers, and he knew it would take time for him to fully understand his own emotions. But for now, he was content with the quiet closeness they shared. As the fire crackled in the hearth, Rimuru felt a sense of calm wash over him. The journey ahead was still long and filled with uncertainty, but for the first time in a while, he felt like they were moving forward together. The unseen bond. As the fire's warmth faded into the night, Rimuru and Chloe shared a quiet moment, the air between them now lighter after their heartfelt exchange. The room, once filled with an unspoken tension, now felt more peaceful, though a lingering uncertainty remained in Rimuru's mind. He still wasn't sure how to process Chloe's feelings, but he knew one thing for certain: he didn't want to hurt her. However, the moment wasn't just shared by the two of them. Deep within Rimuru's soul, Seal observed everything in silence. For her, this development between Rimuru and Chloe was more than just an emotional shift, it was necessary. Seal understood better than anyone that Chloe was an integral part of Rimuru's life. She had witnessed the countless timelines, the suffering, and the lengths Chloe had gone through to protect Rimuru, to stay by his side. To Seal, Chloe was the only person who could be by Rimuru's side in the physical world, just as she herself was his ever-present support within his soul. Ciel's Pav. From her place deep within Rimuru's soul, Seal monitored the flow of his emotions, sensing the inner turmoil he tried to suppress. His hesitation when it came to Chloe wasn't something new, it was a remnant of the complicated past they shared. However, it was different now. Chloe was no longer just a student or a girl lost in time, she was someone who had proven her worth, who had surpassed even the boundaries of time and space to be with Rimuru. Seal had always been there for Rimuru, his guide, his confidant, and his most trusted ally. She was part of his soul, forever intertwined with him. Master, Seal whispered in the quiet of Rimuru's soul, her voice barely a whisper in his mind. You must understand, Chloe is important to you. She always has been. There's no one else more deserving of your heart. Rimuru didn't respond immediately, but Seal could feel the slight ripple in his thoughts, acknowledging her words. He was still struggling, but she knew he'd come to understand it in time. In Seal's mind, Chloe's devotion was unparalleled. She loved Rimuru with a depth that went beyond time itself. And though Seal's love for Rimuru was unquestionable, it was different. Chloe's love was something Rimuru needed in the physical world, a companion to stand by him, support him, and share the burdens of the journey they were on. And to Seal, Chloe was the only one worthy of that role. I am always here for you, my master, Seal continued, her voice filled with both warmth and firmness. But someone must be with you in the world beyond. You need her as much as she needs you. Seal closed her eyes, reaching out with her senses, watching the connection between Rimuru and Chloe grow. She didn't interfere with their bond, she only guided it, allowing Rimuru to realize what she had known all along. Back in the physical world, Rimuru felt a soft brush against his mind. Seal's presence, always a comforting warmth inside him. Her words echoed in his thoughts, and for a moment, he let himself reflect on them. Chloe had done so much for him, far more than he had ever asked for. She had sacrificed her own happiness, her own peace, just to protect him through endless loops of time. The weight of that realization sat heavy on his chest, but at the same time, it made him appreciate her more deeply. Seal was right, Chloe wasn't just a companion, she was a constant in his life, someone who had never wavered, no matter the obstacles. I can't let this slip away, Rimuru thought, though he wasn't sure how to express it to Chloe just yet. For now, he would focus on building the connection between them, letting things evolve naturally. He glanced over at Chloe, who had fallen asleep sitting against the edge of the bed, her head resting on her folded arms. A soft smile tugged at his lips, and before he could stop himself, he reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. Rest well, Chloe, he whispered softly, careful not to wake her. As the night deepened, Rimuru closed his eyes, but he wasn't truly alone. Inside, Seal was still with him, always watching, always there to guide him. And though Rimuru didn't say it aloud, he was grateful for Seal's silent presence. Suddenly, Seal spoke again, her voice light yet teasing. You're growing fond of her, aren't you, master? Rimuru's eyes fluttered open briefly, his lips forming a playful smirk as he replied mentally, you could say that. But you know me, I'm not good at these kinds of things. That's precisely why I'm here. Seal's voice was both amused and comforting. I'll guide you when you're uncertain. But Chloe, she's more than capable of guiding you as well. Rimuru sighed, sinking deeper into the bed. You're always looking out for me, huh? Of course, Seal responded, her tone softening. Because you are everything to me, my master. And Chloe, she is a part of you too. She loves you as much as I do. Her love is something I cannot replicate, something you need. Don't fight it. A soft chuckle escaped Rimuru's lips. I'll try not to. Chloe's paw. Chloe stirred slightly in her sleep, her dreams filled with fragmented memories of the past, of the endless loops she had endured for Rimuru. She could still remember every single time she lost him, every moment of pain, every tear shed. But now, those memories felt like they were fading, replaced by the warmth she felt when she was with him in the present. She hadn't expected her feelings for Rimuru to grow so strong, but they had, and it was something she could no longer deny. Being with him now, in this new world, was a second chance, a chance to show him how much he meant to her without the constraints of their past. Yet there was a lingering insecurity within her every time someone else tried to get close to Rimuru, it stirred a protective, almost jealous side of her. She wanted to keep him safe, to ensure that he knew how much she cared. And if she had to, she wasn't afraid to assert herself. I won't let anyone take him from me, Chloe thought, her mind drifting as sleep began to claim her again. He belongs with me. Ciel's paw. Ciel watched over them both, her presence gentle yet firm. She didn't feel threatened by Chloe's affection for Rimuru, in fact, she welcomed it. She knew that Chloe was the only one capable of understanding and loving Rimuru as deeply as he deserved. And in her own way, Seal saw Chloe as a kindred spirit, someone who would fight for Rimuru just as fiercely as she would. Chloe, Seal whispered to herself, her gaze softening as she watched the girl sleep beside Rimuru. You and we are not so different. With that thought, Seal settled back into the quiet depths of Rimuru's soul, content to watch over the two of them as they journeyed together. Bonds strengthened in the unknown. The sun rose steadily, casting a golden glow over the vast plains stretching before them. Rimuru and Chloe had been traveling for days now, their journey taking them through forests, mountains, and open fields. The road ahead was uncertain, yet there was something comforting in the rhythm of their steps and the unspoken bond growing between them. Rimuru had grown used to the sense of adventure again, the feeling of walking into the unknown, encountering the unexpected. This time, however, it wasn't just for the sake of exploration or power. It was a journey of discovery, not just of the world, but of themselves and each other. As they ventured further, Chloe had begun to open up more, subtly revealing pieces of her inner world while always keeping her affection for Rimuru at the forefront. At the same time, Rimuru found himself drawn into the world with a deeper curiosity than before, fueled by Chloe's presence. She was, after all, unlike anyone else. Her history with him transcended time itself. Their first true test of the journey came in the form of a request from a small village near the edge of a dense forest. Word had spread of a rampaging group of monsters causing destruction in the nearby woods. Though the villagers were hardy, they didn't have the means to defend themselves against such powerful creatures. As they arrived in the village, Rimuru felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The people were desperate, their homes barely standing after a series of attacks. They're coming from the east, one of the village elders explained, his face drawn with worry. We don't know how many there are, but every few nights, they come down from the forest and tear through our crops and homes. Rimuru glanced at Chloe, who nodded in silent agreement. It was clear they needed to step in. He wasn't one to turn away from those in need, and Chloe seemed just as determined to help. They both agreed to hunt down the monsters, clearing the way for peace to return to the village. That night, they ventured deep into the forest, moving in silence, their senses keen and alert. The darkness was thick around them, but it was no match for Rimuru's and Chloe's sharpened instincts. As they walked, Rimuru noticed how Chloe moved with purpose beside him, her confidence in battle unshakable. It was one of the things he admired about her: her strength, her resolve. There was no hesitation in her movements, no doubt in her ability to fight. After a few hours of tracking, they found their target, a pack of mutated creatures, half beast, half elemental. Their eyes glowed ominously in the dark as they prowled around a clearing, clearly preparing for their next attack. Looks like we found our troublemakers, Rimuru said with a small smile, his voice calm but edged with seriousness. Chloe stood beside him, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the situation. There are more than we thought, Chloe remarked, her hand resting on her sword hilt, ready for action. But it shouldn't be too difficult. Rimuru nodded. Let's make it quick. The battle that ensued was fast and fierce. Rimuru's usual calm demeanor was replaced by cold efficiency as he tore through the monsters with his void energy, precise and deadly. He was strategic in his attacks, ensuring that none of the creatures escaped, while Chloe moved with grace and power, her sword slicing through the air as she fought alongside him. Together, they made quick work of the monsters, and when the last one fell, there was a brief moment of silence, the forest holding its breath. Chloe sheathed her sword, wiping her brow. That should be the last of them. Rimuru nodded, his expression softening. You were incredible, Chloe. Chloe smiled at the compliment, a rare blush coloring her cheeks. Thanks. You weren't so bad yourself. As they made their way back to the village, the sense of camaraderie between them deepened. There was something exhilarating about fighting together, knowing they had each other's backs in battle. The village was grateful when they returned, and Rimuru could see the relief on the faces of the villagers as they realized their nightmare was over. But this was only the beginning of their adventures. Exploring unknown lands. After leaving the village behind, Rimuru and Chloe continued their journey across the vast continent. They hunted monsters, explored forgotten ruins, and collected rare materials for crafting and alchemy. Each new town or city they visited was a chance for them to learn more about the world and each other. In one town, they were hired to protect an important merchant who was transporting valuable goods through a dangerous mountain pass. The journey was fraught with peril, with bandits and wild beasts lurking in every shadow. Rimuru and Chloe worked seamlessly together, fending off the threats with ease. At night, around the campfire, Chloe would often glance at Rimuru when she thought he wasn't looking, her feelings for him growing stronger with each passing day. Rimuru noticed, of course, though he wasn't sure how to respond. There were moments when he felt a pull toward her, a longing to bridge the gap between them, but his mind still hesitated, tethered to the past. Ciel's perspective. Inside Rimuru's soul, Ciel watched the growing connection between her master and Chloe with keen interest. Every battle, every conversation, every shared glance, it was clear to Ciel that Chloe was the one who could be by Rimuru's side in ways that no one else could. Chloe's love surpasses time and space, Ciel thought to herself, a small smile forming in the depths of Rimuru's mind. Her dedication to him, her willingness to fight for him. She's the only one worthy. As she observed their journey, Ciel occasionally spoke to Rimuru, offering advice or teasing him about his obvious feelings. "You're getting closer, Master," Ciel's voice echoed softly in Rimuru's mind one evening as they camped near a crystal-clear lake. "It's only a matter of time before you accept her." Rimuru sighed, glancing across the fire at Chloe, who was quietly polishing her sword. "I know, Ciel, but it's complicated, is it?" Ciel replied, a playful note in her voice. "She loves you, Master. She's proven that time and time again. You don't need to overthink it." Rimuru smiled softly, shaking his head. "You make it sound so simple." Ciel's response was warm, almost comforting. "It is simple. You've carried enough burdens. Let her share them with you." Chloe's determination. Chloe could feel the subtle shifts in Rimuru's behavior, the way he seemed to watch her more often now, how his usual lightheartedness softened around her. Yet, there was still a wall between them, one that she was determined to break down. During one of their stops in a bustling city, Chloe found herself growing irritated as she noticed the attention Rimuru attracted. Whether it was the way he carried himself with such unwavering confidence or his charismatic personality, women often found reasons to talk to him. Though Rimuru was oblivious to their advances, Chloe wasn't. Each time a woman leaned in too close or smiled at him with just a bit too much interest, Chloe's protective instincts flared. One afternoon, as they were preparing to leave the city, a particularly bold merchant's daughter had tried to pull Rimuru aside, offering him rare items as a gesture of gratitude. Chloe stood by, her irritation barely concealed, watching the girl fawn over him. Rimuru, ever the kind soul, politely declined, but Chloe couldn't hold back any longer. She stepped forward, her presence suddenly intimidating as she glared at the girl. "He's not interested," Chloe said coldly, her voice calm but laced with warning. The girl, startled by Chloe's fierce expression, quickly backed off and left without another word. Rimuru raised an eyebrow, watching the scene unfold with mild amusement. "Chloe, was that really necessary?" Chloe crossed her arms, her expression softening but still firm. "Someone has to protect you from people like her." Rimuru chuckled, shaking his head. "You're getting scary, Chloe." She didn't respond right away, her eyes softening as she looked at him. "I just don't want to lose you." Rimuru's teasing smile faded, replaced by something more serious. He understood what she meant. She had already lost him once before, in countless timelines. That fear of loss, that need to keep him close, was something he couldn't brush off so easily. For a moment, there was only silence between them, the weight of their shared past settling around them. The journey ahead. As they continued to travel from village to village, city to city, the bond between Rimuru and Chloe grew. They fought side by side, protected those in need, and explored the unknown parts of the world together. And with each passing day, Chloe's determination to stay by Rimuru's side never wavered. But in the quiet moments, when the world was still, Rimuru felt the pull of something deeper, a connection that went beyond friendship, beyond the past. It was a feeling he couldn't ignore forever. And deep within his soul, Ciel watched with quiet satisfaction, knowing that the journey ahead would only bring them closer. To be continued.